cabinet meeting chaired by President Yoweri Museveni on September 10, 2018, agreed to a massive restructuring of government agencies and ministries. This restructuring comes at a time when the economy is in tailspin, as government estimates that it could save ₦1 trillion a year.
We expect to get cost savings by merging the administrative functions, as have been mentioned. Those are the generalities: procurements, accounts, human resource, and the like, where we'll save about $988.1 billion.
In the last 5 years, Uganda's economy has been in contraction, falling from 7% to 4% in economic growth figure rates. As the country got mired into a debt trap as a result of heavy borrowing, the return on investments, such as infrastructure projects, was not immediate. Government had largely hedged its bets on oil production by 2020 to sustain the much-vaunted middle-income status. This, perhaps, required double-digit figures of economic growth anchored on oil production, but this came to naught. With high unemployment rates amongst the second youngest population in the world, this disillusionment fed into apathy. As university graduates fled the country in droves to go and do petty work in the Middle East and faraway lands, where some faced the prospect of slavery, torture, and death in exchange for a pittance, their privileged colleagues who are mid-level managers at an agency like UNRWA earned a staggering 15 million shillings in salary. Government created these agencies to improve efficiency from a civil service fraught with corruption and incompetence. This process, which was not well thought out, resulted into one of the most flawed pay structures. Whereas a CEO at Uganda National Roads Authority earns a salary of 45 million shillings per month with hefty perks, a senior surgeon at Mulago Hospital earns a paltry 3 million shillings a month. And while the Kampala City Council Executive Director earns 43 million shillings a month, a permanent secretary, who is a supervisor, earns 15 million shillings as a monthly salary. These irregular payments have depleted merit, competence, and the traditional chain of command. Now the argument being presented for merging and mainstreaming is that coordination needs to be strengthened between ministries and agencies.
Some of these institutions were actually speaking across sectors. Now you are taking them where in government things are strictly mandates and sectors. And these ministries are not talking to each other. And yet, as agencies, there are certain agencies that were built in a way that there will be that coordination.
If you're merging UNRWA with works, at a time when NTV Express Highway, a time when oil roads are being done, and all these other PPPs, why don't you use UDC? UDC working with Ministry of Works to put in place a mix of Chinese contractors, for example, now that they have annihilated all foreign companies, working with some local Uganda. Instead of firing all the 80 UNRWA contractors, you do a management buyout. Allow Ugandan engineers to work with these Chinese for 10 years. They will have become local companies.
The news of the mergers created excitement amongst fiscal prudence exponents and a majority of Ugandans who are vexed by wastage. Yet, it appears that there is no robust blueprint of how to manage such an intricate process. For instance, which technocrats are going to oversee this exercise? What is the roadmap for legislation that requires both statutory and constitutional amendments? What will happen to the long-term contracts signed by these agencies? In developing countries, governments normally conduct business according to global trends. There was a time when the post-independence governments state-owned everything. Then came the rehabilitation phase, heralded by the economic recovery program of the Obote II regime, which included renovation and growth of government cooperatives. But this was interrupted by the war, and when the National Resistance Army government came into power, it found the economy in shambles. All these interventions were carried out with development partner assistance.
Now, at a stage when you are coming from war, you are almost a failed state, you are almost a fragile state. So the development assistance then is more of technical cooperation and grants. So at that stage, you could not even acquire loans. We were on grants. Now, because we were on grants, our ministries, departments, and agencies also were being run by grants. But grants come with projects. So at that point in time, most government departments had projects. So you would find a project having more personnel, having more finances, having more vehicles, and more allowances. And yet the line ministries, department, and agency is devoid of transport, devoid of logistics, devoid of staffing, devoid of allowances.
When Uganda adopted the Washington Consensus and implemented structural adjustment programs in the early 1990s, this process was overseen by experts from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
So the moment we agreed to liberalize, to privatize, in effect, we welcomed the financing of the World Bank and related entities and the Western powers.
The new restructuring process has been given a 3-year period. However, there is an absence of a clear strategy.
Remember, what we don't want to lose are the gains from efficiency, the gains in productivity that these agencies were giving at a costly level, because of some of them were costly, but as I was saying, some costs may have been justified by those efficiencies. Now we might cut the budget and it becomes the proverbial statement of throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Now, I am a strong supporter of these mergers. The mergers come as a realization that there is a duplication, there is parallel institutions, there are government institutions competing to do the same work. It's not just about merging these entities. It's first of all on agreeing what's the industrial policy of this country. Do you want to do import substitution? Are you for boo-boo? Are you going to centralize procurement and say, yes, Uganda is importing a lot of stationery, Uganda is importing a lot of computers. Can we make the Monitor, the New Vision, can we make Oscar Industries, Pick Fair, give us a production line of all stationaries for Uganda? So you're using government procurement to support local content.
Government plans to table an omnibus bill to Parliament to effect the amendments. However, it will require a constitutional amendment to merge Uganda Land Commission. Yet, other sticky issues remain unresolved, including contractual obligations between these agencies and other firms.
The merger of government agencies and authorities does not necessarily have political implications unless they were set up under the Constitution, like the Uganda Land Commission. It's a creature of the Constitution. You cannot abolish it. You cannot merge it with any other agency without amending the Constitution. The rest of the agencies are set up by acts of Parliament, like UNRA, like Registration Services Bureau, a host of many of them are set up by acts of Parliament. Since they are legal bodies, you would need a law to either dissolve them, merge their functions.
Agencies such as Uganda Cancer Institute, Uganda Heart Institute, and Uganda Registration Services Bureau are now highly specialized, and returning them to their respective ministries will greatly reduce on their efficiencies and competencies.
So it's going to lay off 20 people who would have run your manual system, replace it with 5 people and software. But the 5 people now need to be paid expensively, because they are going to be high caliber individuals. Now, I'm not very sure the civil service is able to pick off that. So if by pushing back URSB, I don't know, to wherever they want to send it, you might now not be able to hire those particular competencies. Knowing the procurement systems in the mainstream of government, you might not even be able to renew a license of your software or to buy the next antivirus.
Uganda's economy is private sector led, and this begs the question, why do we have a bloated public service? There are fears that the restructuring will result into the erosion of expertise. With a cash-strapped government, it is not yet clear how much money government will require to pay gratuity claims and terminal benefits of employees. Government will also need to pay outstanding debts on the supply of goods and services. Loss of employment could also elicit resistance.
There's going to be resistance from those who are losing jobs. There's going to be resistance from vested interests that are going to be uprooted. Under new public management, there has been a lot of outsourcing in terms of consultancy work, outsourcing in terms of tenders and so on, and a lot of work being done by others. Those who have been benefiting from this enterprise, whether they are public officials or not, will try to resist the reform. So how do you manage the resistance that is going to come with the reform and not undermine government legitimacy?
But also there's the problem that if staff know that they may be losing their jobs, there may be an element of asset stripping, corruption. The Ugandans that I know, if somebody is an MD and he knows that in a year's time he may be losing his job, this may be the time for him or her to pension himself off by signing unfavorable contracts. If there's machinery or vehicles that are still serviceable, they may choose to board them off and they buy them off for a song. You may need maybe some legislative intervention to legislate against certain kind of activities in the interim.
Highly placed sources reveal that employees of some agencies have stopped receiving salaries as a result of uncertainty about the merger process. Other agencies that are being merged largely or entirely depend on donor funding. It is also not yet clear how government will deal with its appointees and regime cronies in these agencies, which are seen as vehicles of patronage.
President can always find his other ways of doing whatever he wants to do. Some of these can become presidential advisors. He has also packed people there. And that's a space we're also saying he needs to engage. But also I think the president has reached a level where he himself is what we call a straitjacket, between the rock and hard place. He's got to decide the cost of patronage has become exorbitant.
I know many former political aspirants who get reabsorbed into mainstream public service because it is also no longer run on merit. The only area where there will be a loss is the boards, because once these statutory bodies are abolished, then you will not have the boards functioning.
Structuring process become the country's economic miracle. If we are moving with global trends of having lean government spending, then the mergers should have come with an industrial policy, import substitution policy, centralization of procurement by ring-fencing government money, and the revival of cooperatives.
The money we are scattering in youth livelihood, in women entrepreneurship, in this skilling which is done unconstitutionally in only some places where they have made noise politically, forgetting Ulisa where you want to produce oil. This money is enough to revamp cooperative bank. The money we have wasted in NADS, in the last NADS or prosperity creation unrelated for the last 12 years, we would have had a agriculture bank yesterday.
One way to focus resources is to adopt the regional tier system of government.
I moved a month ago with my colleagues the motion urging government to fast track the regional tier government as provided for by Article 178 of the Constitution. By the time that motion was moved in 2005, there were only 80 districts. So Uganda would be having 80 districts, but with very strong regional governments. Regional governments which bring together capacities, finances, resources, engineers, doctors in a region.
In a country with some of the highest income inequality and an ever-growing gap between the rich and the poor, news of the mergers came as a welcome relief to low-income earners. But if government needs to deliver sound economy, it should not sanction piecemeal measures, but instead it should end wasteful expenditure on a bloated administration. Gillian Nantume, NTV Panorama.